I want to thank the Universal Peace Federation for sponsoring this conference. In particular, I want to thank Jim Flynn and Gail Payne for all their hard work and for inviting me. And I also obviously want to thank all of you for showing up. I know many of you are busy and you have very long and hard-working days and taking the time to come out here, and I appreciate it. The topic of my talk, what Gail sort of wanted me to talk about, is something that I've been mentioning quite often on the radio when I do talk to people, and that is the influence of Hollywood and American popular culture in fueling terrorism and anti-Americanism around the world. And, you know, I usually start off with a joke. It's sort of the way talks usually are done. But I have to be very honest with you. I can't come up with a joke for this kind of a talk because part of my job as the editor of Insight is I get around. I not just get around in Washington, I get around the world. I do a lot of traveling, especially in Europe. And I believe that slowly but surely there is a gathering storm. I believe that there is growing contempt and hostility towards the United States, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, and in Latin America. And one of the things that I found absolutely most shocking in most of my journeys around the world is a lot of this hatred and hostility to the United States has almost nothing to do with our politics. Yes, it has something to do with George Bush and the war in Iraq, obviously. But at a deeper level, it has something much more profound to do with what we as America stand for and what we are projecting to the world. And what I find remarkable is that literally now, as we stand here, 2008, March 1st, America is the modern Rome of the Roman Empire. It bestrides the world the way Rome once did. It is a colossus. Our military, political, and economic power is unrivaled. And yet, just like Rome, we are becoming despised and hated around the world. And I am, among other things, I was trained as a historian. And one of my periods that I love the most is the ancient Roman period. Edward Gibbons, the very famous historian who looked at the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, pointed out one thing. He said, more than its armies, more than its repression and subjugation of peoples, militarily and politically, what made Rome hated was its cultural arrogance and, most importantly, its decadence. People despise the fact that what Rome came to represent to them. And I see that very clearly. And for me, in fact, it was almost a shocking moment. It was 2005. My wife was then still teaching at Howard University. She's a British historian. And we took a wonderful group of African-American students. And we took them on a cultural trip to Paris so they could learn about, see the wonderful architecture, look at some of the great French novelists, some of the great French artists. And so what we wanted to do, because what's happening in France now is there is a growing Muslim population. And it's now about 10% of France, and it's getting bigger and bigger. So we thought, well, this would be a wonderful experience to have these students see what many of these Muslim religious leaders are saying or thinking in their communities. So we went to the La Grande Mosque de Paris, the grand sort of mosque in Paris. And we walk in, there I am with my wife and with the students. And I could tell you right now, I didn't even need to be there for more than 2 minutes to tell you it was a front for Al-Qaeda. I mean, it was so obvious. We walk in, and the imams and all of the people praying there are looking at us with this, I mean, utter hatred. There's just no other word for it. And the imam walks up to us and he says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, you know, sir, with all due respect, we came here, we heard it's one of the biggest mosques in Paris. We want to see, can you teach us a little bit about Islam, in particular introduce the students to Islam?" And he looks around and he says, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Washington, D.C. I'm a journalist. I'm editor at Insight magazine. We're a sister publication of the Washington Times." He says, "Oh, you're from Washington." He goes, "You must know George Bush." I'm like, no. Listen, I cover George Bush. I don't know George. It's like George Bush and I play golf together or something. And he goes to me, he starts saying, he goes, "Look," he goes, "tell your students to get away. I don't want to see them. And tell your wife to get away. And I want to take you downstairs." Okay? So I go downstairs. And it's in a bath. and you see a lot of people sort of washing their feet because they have to be clean, their feet have to be clean before they go into the mosque to pray. And then he looks at me and he closes the door. And he says to me, and he says, look at my followers. Their feet are clean, their bodies are clean, their spirits and mind are clean. You Americans, you are decadent, you are adulterers, you are pornographers. Look at what you spread on our TV screens and our movie screens. You degrade your women, you tell us to take drugs, you have nothing but contempt for religion and the family, and you and George Bush want to impose your culture on our soil, on our culture, on our civilization? No way. And he then said to me, he says, you tell George Bush from me personally, Iraq will be America's graveyard. We will kill every American soldier in Iraq, and then we will go on Afghanistan, and then we will come for you in your homeland. Why? Because you are no longer God's people. And I walked away. Now, when I walked out of there, it suddenly clicked in my mind. Yes, he was angry about the war in Iraq. Yes, he was angry about George Bush. But what really disgusted him was obviously what he was telling me. It is the images that we sell and portray to the world. And so when I look at Hollywood, and when I look at what they portray and show to us on a daily basis, it really is. It is a celebration of sex. It is a celebration of abortion on demand. It is a celebration of drugs. It is a celebration of homosexuality. It is nothing but contempt for religion and the family. And most of the world is not liberal or conservative. It is traditionalist. People believe that ultimately we are here to serve a larger purpose, that we are created by God, whatever your religion may be, and that we are here to serve God's law and to do His will on this earth. People are traditional in their values. They believe in God. They believe in family. They believe in living for something greater than themselves. So when they see these images, they recoil from it. It disgusts them. It revolts them. And so one of the points that I make on radio again and again and again is if we want to win the war on terror, even more than our foreign policy, even more than all of the diplomacy that we try to do around the world, our biggest export is our popular culture. Our movies are everywhere. Our TV programs are everywhere. You can't go anywhere in the world without seeing it. If we want to show the world that we are worthy of American leadership, we have to show to them that we are truly a decent, moral, and cultural society. Because if we don't, we will lose. And so, this is one of the points I really want to highlight.